Mbali. We speak to Mthethwa, who is on the other side, of course, just giving us a sense of what is happening on the ground, giving us some reaction, of course, to the State of the Province address. Mbali, what do you have in your hand?
It's Mbalenhle. Thank you so much for that. Well, what we have right now, we are getting reaction from political parties, and we heard that State of the Province address where the Premier has acknowledged the challenges of the province, water featuring quite prominently, also talking about the aging infrastructure and speaking on plans to address the issue of schools that are operating at over capacity. You know, there are plans to build more schools in order to try and assist in that regard and ensure that people are able to get placements at schools. You will remember that we had those challenges earlier this year. But I'm going to get reaction from Nkululeko Dunga from the EFF, who is the provincial chairperson. Your thoughts on this state of the province? You obviously are Panyaza Lesufi's, the Premier's worst critic.
No, thank you for having us. Look, we are not entirely disappointed with some of the submissions that have been made, because the challenges that he had to speak of are challenges that the EFF has, in more than most cases, have always over-elaborated on. But what we are extremely aggrieved by is that in as much as he speaks of the challenges, does not speak of an in-depth program of action. It would have been difficult, obviously, with the Division of Revenue Bill not having been passed through Parliament, for him to really and genuinely allocate even certain funding models that will approve some of these budgets that he speaks of. I mean, you look at, for example, in terms of the infrastructure of schooling, we have over 5,500 classes in shortage, and 18 schools will not assist in creating and ensuring that there's a backlog that is sustained and is corrected. That is historic. He speaks of at least about 81,000 houses that he would have had to be able to do in terms of the projects that he spoke of. But we've got almost 2 million housing backlog in Gauteng, and nothing bears mention of the people of Alexandra, who were unfortunately still promised those houses, in as much as he has attributed to saying that he was actually lying. That is the president of the country. There is still an expectation from the people of Alexandra to actually fix that mess, and he has really not spoken about that. In terms of the water infrastructure, I mean, how can you speak of water infrastructure and refer to the collapse of water infrastructure, particularly because of a lack of pumping of water in at least 2 of these reservoirs? What you would have spoken about is that there is potentially a 40% water loss that is attributed from the point of water capture and all the way up until the end user in itself, which is a problem. That means that we've got an infrastructure decay in Gauteng. But he mentions a lot of these programs that are attributed to non-delegated authorities, at least by the municipalities. But we still have a 2 to 3% allocation of revenue by national government to local governance, and it's actually local government competency to actually address these challenges. And the province is not speaking of changing the fiscal management to ensure that there's actually more money that is allocated to municipalities, but attributes a lot of these challenges that we faced to be something that is delegated to municipalities. And that is our challenge. I mean, at least what the EFF has always said is that let's look at Gauteng being a metro, a complete metro. And he draws reference to that to say that let's take all these metropolitan police and have a more intergovernmental relation across the entire province, which is what the EFF has always advocated for. But we must give thanks particularly to the MMC of Environment and Waste Collection in the city of Tshwane for being acknowledged and having cleaned the city, which he does not want to reflect to and draw reference to. And also Commissar Thembi Msane, who heads water, intergovernmental committee, particularly on water in Gauteng, by the way, as being the best municipality that is running the issues of water. And we must attribute that. If you want to look at how we can change the challenges of society, particularly in Gauteng, you must be able to attribute successes even beyond political party lines.
Okay, thank you so much. Patricia, who are you standing by with?
Herbert, are you saying switch on the
Okay,
light?
I see Patricia is not standing by. I'm actually standing by with Funzi Ngobeni here. Funzi, you are with ActionSA. Your thoughts and your thoughts of the statement that was released just now.
Yeah, look, I mean, our view is that this SOPA was a build-up from the previous SOPA with a key focus on infrastructure development, on crime fighting and so forth. So we are of the view that the Premier touched on some of the issues that we raised in our pre-SOPA media statement. We indicated that the issue of water needs to get preference, at least needs to be looked at. And I think he spoke at length about it, including the interventions that they are making in Mfuleni and Ekenhof. But the truth is that these are long-term solutions. We also need interventions that are short-term in their nature, including dealing with what's happening in municipalities, because most of the issues that affects the water distributions is the leakages that are happening in municipalities. So we hope that they will dedicate some resources towards that. He spoke about inner city rejuvenation. I think he spoke about it in the last State of the Province address, and we have not seen a lot of progress there. I think he needs to really put some focus onto it, because municipalities sometimes they just do operations and which are really not effective as such. We need consistency in that, and we need him to intervene, especially in municipalities that are not functional. I mean, how many times we've been spoken about Mfuleni as a municipality? How many times we've been spoken about municipalities like Merafong? And we need to focus there in terms of really interventions so that we can be able to see the province growing.
Thank you so much. That is Funzi Ngobeni from ActionSA, one of those parties that is not yet part of the government of provincial unity. Patricia, I understand that you're ready right now. It's over to you. The DA is standing by while we hand over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Mbalenhle. I'm standing by with the ACDP. Bishop Dalton Adams is here. From the ACDP side, what do you make of the Premier's address? Was it inspiring? Does it give you the confidence that you perhaps need, that the challenges that are plaguing Gauteng would be overcome in this financial year?
In my view, it's a mixed bag of things that the Premier spoke about. One doesn't know, must you feel hurt, must you feel angry, must you feel disappointed. There are some good things the Premier mentioned with regards to what's happening in Gauteng. But from where I sit in our communities, it seems like it's not touching our communities. You're talking about human settlements. Houses haven't been built in our communities since 1994, prior to 1994.
When you say our communities, please.
The colored communities. And I want to stress it. It's not racist. But we have to come to a place where we have to look at Gauteng doesn't consist only of black and white people, but there are colored people. When the issue of drugs is major problems in our communities. We want to know how he's going to deal with the issue of drugs in our communities. We want to know how he's going to deal with the issue of asbestos schools and classrooms that are still in our communities. And this is the challenge that we have, that we feel that most of the things are going to other areas, like the hostels, for instance. And yet the flats is dilapidated, is not maintained. And you might say it's a local government competence, but we as a province give grants to them. But it's not being touched at all. In every speech, I've been in legislature now for 6 years, and I support the Premier wholeheartedly in all these programs and all these projects. But now we have a challenge that we feel that nothing is happening. It's not coming down to our people. You're talking about roads, it's not happening by us. Potholes, the robots, everything's not happening in our communities, and that is my challenge.
But when he speaks about the people of Gauteng, is that not him talking about the collective?
He might be speaking about the collective, but it's not getting down to the people that actually need it in our colored communities. He might be saying, and it's good ideas that he has. What I'm appealing to the Premier is also look at those areas. Premier speaks about 3 bakeries in Westbury and Elders and Tukomsras. I don't even know about those bakeries, and yet I'm in the Gauteng legislature. So it's this kind of disconnect that we have that we must get right. But at the end of the day, if he wants the people of the colored communities to actually begin to feel the billions of rands that are invested in other areas, in other regions, it's time that he also look at these communities.
Right, thank you so much. The Freedom Front Plus joins me right now. I'm speaking to Anton. Thank you so much. It was a marathon of a speech, about 3 hours long, 13 challenges that were highlighted, and of course the plans to to tackle these challenges. What do you make? Are you inspired? Do you see that there might be a proper vision that awaits Gauteng to tackle the many challenges that the province is facing?
Yes, the Premier is in big trouble politically, and his party is in big trouble politically. They received 34% only last year, and it looks like the polls show that they are still dwindling, that the polls show that they are actually doing worse now. So I think the Premier is in a space where he's willing to work with people he wasn't willing to work with before, which is a good thing because they are still the government. And for the first time in years, I've heard the words of new investments. The ANC government has been talking about existing investments for a long time. You know, they've been talking about the motor vehicle manufacturers in South Africa every SOPA. But there's no new investments.
Okay, we come up of that very abruptly, of course, as we continue to bring you the reaction following the State of the Province address. Let's take you to Mbalenhle Mthethwa, who is also giving us a sense of what politicians have to say following Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi's address a short while ago. Mbalenhle, what are they saying?
Well, I'm standing by with the Democratic Alliance provincial chairperson, Solim Simanga, to get reaction from the official opposition in the province. Thank you so much for taking the time. Your thoughts on the very long and lengthy State of the Province address?
Well, I feel abused. First of all, that we had to be subjected to a regurgitation of what has been said quite a number of years. Even some of these things are things that have been said even during the time of Nomvula Mkonyane. You're talking about moving from a paper-based to a digitized patient file. That is something that Brian Hlongwa spoke about. That is something that was spoken about a number of years ago. And you have a premier that has a very very smooth tongue. Last year he makes promises, and these are a number of the promises that he's made. So he said he's going to be buying from the private sector 18 hospitals, not even touched it once. This year he says now they're going to build 11 hospitals with the private sector. But that is a complete lie, because if you look at his actual speech, it says that there are 11 private sector that have applied for for funding, not for funding, but they've applied for licenses, which is their job. So you can't claim that when you give them licenses, then therefore you have a partnership with them, because that is your job to do that. He then spoke about the number of jobs that is created through Nasispani, and I've said to you a number of times, this has nothing to do with the creation of jobs, but it has everything to do with electioneering. It has backfired spectacularly. They've dropped below 30%, and you would have or below 40%. You would have known what happens then. He then speaks about what he calls the G13. The G13 problems. Please tell me, of all those problems, which ones has not been created by the ANC? The fact that we have over 1.2 million housing backlog, and a big challenge of that in Gauteng has to do with the level of corruption that has taken place, the health sector that is falling apart, the Department of Education that is not able to do that, security, and I can go on and on. We've had nothing here.
Thank you. There you have it. That is the Democratic Alliance speaking to us and giving their reaction to the Gauteng Premier's speech here in Pretoria. Patricia, I have the MK representative speaking to us, who's going to speak to us very shortly, but I'm going to hand over to you before I speak to him.